The Chicago Sky had their introductory press conferences for Courtney Williams and Isabelle Harrison. James Wade even got in on the activities. We're going to talk about what those press conferences mean for the culture they're building here at the Chicago Sky with the new additions. We're also going to go around the WNBA for news and the Chicago Sky make a few camp deal signings. We're going to do all that and more right after this.
Welcome to Chicago Sky Central, and here's your host, Haize.
All right, Sky fans, welcome to another episode of Chicago Sky Central. I'm the host here, Haize. And before we get into the press conference, we're going to go around the WNBA because it's going to be real quick, and we're going to get back into the business that needs to be talked about, and that's our Chicago Sky. So the Connecticut Sun have waived Jasmine Walker. Now, this is the 7th player out of the 12 drafted in the first round of the 2021 draft to be waived, meaning there's some pretty good quality talent still out there in the free agent market. Now, it does seem like the Chicago Sky are wrapping up, but there's still a lot of teams around the WNBA that could be looking for additions. And considering you have 7 out of the 12 players drafted in the first round of 2021, all out there in free agency and being waived, I don't think they're all in free agency, but all have been waived at some point. It just highlights kind of why, while I still do not agree, it does highlight why the Chicago Sky GM James Wade and coach James Wade felt like, hey, let's go with the surefire thing over these first round picks. Now, I do think that we gave up too much, but there is something to be said. And me and Pat, the designer, we do actually talk about WNBA as well, just in personal conversations. And that is one of the things that he did point out is that, you know, how many of the first round picks in the WNBA end up just not even making their teams or not getting minutes. We did send out some draft picks for a surefire player. I just hope that it works out because, again, if it doesn't work out, it's going to be a tall price to pay. But James Wade made comments on that, so I'm going to let his word speak for it when we get to there. But next up, the New York Liberty re-signed Haize. And so this 23-year-old center who had a breakout season last year, averaging 8.5 points per game, 3.6 rebounds in 32 games played. And she's also going to be playing on the Chinese national team. So those are kind of some of the bigger moves that went on around the WNBA so far since our last episode. But let's get into these introductory press conferences. Now, I'm going to focus a little bit on each player and the coach in some of these things, but we're going to have a kind of a free-flowing conversation just in regards to how it worked out overall. And so both players were asked about Kahleah Copper and the role that Copper played in bringing them into Chicago. And Courtney Williams said first that after a conversation with James Wade and Kahleah Copper, not at the same time, but independently, that they both contacted her in free agency. She even went to say that Kahleah Copper's pitch to Courtney Williams was, "I need a killer next to me." And so that just goes to show you, and we have more comments on them that really speak to the type of play style that this Chicago Sky team expects to adapt and their identity to be as a team. But she also talked about that she expects them to play fast with the way that the roster has and pushing the pace at all times, especially with Marina Mabrey being there as well. And Courtney Williams talked a lot about how important it is that her and Isabelle have already played together before. They played together over in Italy. Isabelle Harrison even pointed out herself how they were drafted together. So they are very familiar with each other. Now, that's important in sports, especially if you and Isabelle Harrison even pointed on that, on saying that she knows how Courtney Williams likes to score. She understands how to pass with the ball, where she likes the ball to be passed at. So, you know, the Sky, while, yes, they're losing a lot of their identity, we're losing a lot of pieces that have been on this franchise for years and years and years, they're bringing in 2 players that have a high level of just being familiar with one another. So that's going to help as well. But I like to hear that play style, the fast play style. And they actually pointed out that since James Wade has taken over the Chicago Sky, the Sky averaged the most points at the rim than any other WNBA team by a large margin. And Isabelle Harrison went to point that out, how that plays into her play style, how that plays into the things that she likes, and that how she likes to operate near that rim. And she talked about the opportunities that is going to give her and open up for her with the way that the Chicago Sky and James Wade coaching philosophies already kind of align with the things that they like to do. And both players, Courtney Williams and Isabelle Harrison, were both asked about kind of how they feel about replacing players that were mainstays or big parts of the Chicago Sky for the last couple of years. And Courtney Williams said it, and I loved her saying, she says, we're all players in this league. And then Isabelle Harrison said, I played against those guys. I understand, not in a disrespectful way, but just to say that she understands, but they are stars in their own right. Courtney Williams and Isabelle Harrison absolutely feel like they belong. And one of the things as well that we talked about is that or that we got, especially from Isabelle Harrison, is how much she thinks the city of Chicago is beautiful, and that she was really sold on the move to the Chicago Sky, not necessarily just because of Kahleah Copper reaching out to her, but more so because when she was here for the All-Star game last year, the WNBA All-Star weekend, that she just fell in love with that city, and she knew that this city could offer her things. Now, Courtney Williams went on to say that she feels like she can become a star here in Chicago. She says that she feels no pressure by the legacy left by the players that left, that she's going to come in here and be a star of her own right. That's what you like to hear there as well. And so, Isabelle Harrison, to move it on there, it seems like she is very high on the coaching philosophy of James Wade. She spoke of him very highly. So, I know some Sky fans right now sit with kind of a weird place with this team and we think it's going to be. But, on James Wade specifically, but she's seen both players really seem very high on head coach James Wade. And, Isabelle Harrison also pointing out that Kahleah Copper hit her up immediately after the signing was announced. So, overall, I like what I'm hearing from both the player aspects of this. The fact that they expect in Isabelle Harrison to be a tough team, a physical team, but a team that also likes to push the pace. And considering that they already are a team that likes to get to the rim, and how this team's going to come together. When you look at Kahleah Copper and the physicality that she always plays with on that offensive and defensive side of the ball, what I've been saying hopefully is going to come true. And I've been saying for a while now that this team is going to be a tough, physical, two-way team. And while we may not have, at least coming into this, the same expectations that we had coming into last season as the defending champions, this team is going to look to set a tone physically against other teams. And I already like how they both have talked about and understand how Marina Mabrey plays into kind of bringing this whole thing together. So it's overall, it's a exciting feel around this team right now. And I think that with all the things, all the pieces that we did lose, all the players that we lost, that especially Courtney Vandersloot, I told you guys, she's a legend to me. Azurá Stevens, I was really hoping she was going to come back, but that frees up some things for Rebecca Gardner. And those players leaving, but it seems like in new players coming in, we're going to adapt a new identity. And it seems like an identity that's very reflective of how we like our teams in Chicago. Chicago teams, we like those teams that play tough. We like those teams that punch above their weight. We like those teams that have that dog in them. We like the teams that just really like to play physical and don't shy away from the physicality of whatever sport. That's any sport that we support with our Chicago team. So I like that the players understand that. I like how they talked about the city. I already like that. It seems like they have their mind focused on how all these pieces are going to come together once they get in training camp and things like that. So as far as these press conferences from Isabelle Harrison and Courtney Williams, they both get shining stars for me. Not that it matters, but just in watching these press conferences. And, Courtney Williams seems like she's maybe a little bit more reserved off the court, which there's a lot of people, if you guys watch a lot of sports, there are a lot of sports athletes that are more reserved off the court, but when they get on the field, on the court, whatever it is, that dog just comes out in them. And that is Courtney Williams. And seeing how she was kind of a little bit more shy in that interview and kind of out of her element it was fun to see, fun to get that kind of, to understand and learn the players' personalities, because of course I've seen the players play, but to really get a feel for their personalities in this. And Isabelle Harrison, almost the opposite of what I thought. She just seems like she has this cool, calm demeanor in which she's just very confident in herself. The confidence that Isabelle Harrison exuded in that press conference was palpable. And so, feeling that and needing that to come to a team that has lost very big pieces of their identity, I think we're bringing in two players that are going to really stand up and play good for the Chicago Sky team and really fit in well with Kahleah Copper, fit in well with Rebecca Gardner. Marina Mabrey is going to have so many weapons at her disposal that like to get out and run. And that quick, fast, physical play style, I can't wait to see what that Chicago Sky team looks like. Now, we also heard from James Wade in this. He talked the longest, probably about double the time that the players talked. And, he pointed out how this was a time for the Chicago Sky to change their style of play. And so, it's good to have a coach that at least right now, paying lip service to, because that's all he can do right now. He can't prove it out on the court, but it's just giving that to say that he realizes how this Sky team needed to change the identity. He even said that he kind of looked at the opportunity of the players leaving to construct a team of players that just fit and complemented each other well. But the key thing that he said here is that we have Kahleah Copper as a cornerstone to build around, and they built this team with the idea of how it complements Kahleah Copper's game and the way that she likes to play and the physicality that she likes to play. He says that he expects this team to play with high levels of intensity, and you get that feeling from this team as well. I'm not the highest on James Wade. I'm just going to admit it. I'm not the highest on James Wade. I think he's done a solid job. I don't think he's great as of yet. I haven't seen anything to me that, and I know I'm saying that about a coach that won a championship, but I don't necessarily see anything that just screams greatness to me yet. And I do think that he's taken some risk in building this team, but he seems to understand that risk. And that was kind of brought home even more by this quote. He was asked about the Marina Mabrey and what we gave up in the trade for her, and he said this: I know what she does, and I know what she brings to the table. So that's who we're going to rock with. I understand that the 2023 and 24 draft picks can be great players. But he expressed the confidence in them. But, and sometimes there's something to be said with that. He said that, he planned for this free agency. He's also planning for next year's free agency. So he does, at least, even though if we don't necessarily agree with the vision, at least he is moving forward with a vision. Now, I do love as well what he said about your rebuilding team. He said this: I'm not effing planning on losing. And that's the mentality. Regardless of how much I like James Wade and his coaching style and some of the things that he's done, I love to hear that a head coach that defiantly says that a head coach that that is not taking the easy out to say, this can be a down season for us. If the Chicago Sky did not try to rebuild, if they did not try to build a new identity, if they did not end up being one of the teams that really competed hard, well, not competed hard, but didn't really get a lot of wins this season, nobody would have knocked the Chicago Sky for that, considering everything that they lost in this offseason. But to have a coach and GM that wants to win, and in his mind, he's put together the best team that he could, at least right now, on the fly with losing a player. He even talked about how they couldn't secure the signatures of the players that left, meaning that he probably did try, that he had a plan to hit the ground running to build then around Kahleah Copper. And that's always been the thing for the Chicago Sky, is that we do have Kahleah Copper to build around, is that we do have that piece, even with other players leaving, that we still have that piece, that player, that identity of the team, that player that absolutely can be one of the greats still on this team. And there's something to be said as well about having to try to put a team together around that player, especially as she's coming up for free agency, that's going to compete and that's going to show her that she needs to stay here in Chicago. Don't really get the feel that Kahleah Copper may leave. It really does, especially in hearing how she recruited these players that came to this team and were on the press conference. It really seems that she's engaged. She's locked in Chicago, and she wants to see the Sky be a team that just competes. She just wants to win. And as long as the Chicago Sky offer her opportunities to do that, I don't think we're going to have to worry about that in the long run. Now, before we go, we got a couple of camp signings to talk about. The first one up is Anile Maley. And this, she averaged last year 2 points per game, 1.8 rebounds, just a little bit under an assist per game. So, it's nothing amazing. So, she's played here before, but she comes in the camp deal. She's a rookie. So we'll see what happens with that. So, we'll see what that ends up being. Again, these camp deals really don't turn into anything. So, she's a forward. So we do need still some size on this team. So something to be looked at with that as well. And then next up, we have Christine Anigwe. Now this is a player as well. A little on the younger side. She was a first-round pick. She was the 9th overall pick in 2019. She has played with the Dallas Wings, the Connecticut Sun, the Los Angeles Sparks, the Dallas Wings again, and the Sparks again. And then last year she played with the Phoenix Mercury. She's played a total of 64 games in her WNBA career. She's averaging shooting the ball at 44% for her career. Last year she shot 50% from the field, not averaging that many shots per game though, only averaging 1 shot per game. So there you go on that one. Last year, over the course of her career, she's averaged 2.5 shots per game. But again, these camp deals, another forward. I think James Wade is trying to take a look at adding some depth pieces if needed, just because of the lack of size kind of around the Chicago Sky right now. We still don't know what's going on with Lee Yaroo. So if she does end up coming back, that's some more size for the Sky in addition to who we already have here. But hey, listen, training camp's coming. And once training camp starts, we are rocking and rolling. So off-season things like that. We got the WNBA draft to get to too before that. But hey, it's coming. And I can't wait to call Sky. And I asked you guys to vote on if you wanted live post-game shows after Chicago Sky games. 95% of you guys said yes, so you guys can be in tune for that as well. But that is it for me for today. Make sure you're following the show at Chicago Sky Pod on every social media platform. You can also send us any feedback, questions, comments, concerns, ChicagoSkyCentral@gmail.com. And then lastly, if you want to leave a text and or voicemail, number to do so, 773-270-2799. We are the number one spot for everything Chicago Sky related. And we'll see you guys next time we go to Skytown. Peace.
This has been a presentation of the Break Media.